The three of us are going to present for you some material that, as Nick said, comes from Focus on the Family. So my journey with this material began about 14 years ago when I was up in Mackay, and there was a spate of people sadly taking their own lives. And so we were looking for real helpful materials that could actually prevent or help to prevent or intervene in some way in our community. And Focus on the Family have this program called Born Survivors. What we're going to share with you today is just a snippet of that, a practical help for people to stop yourself before you get to that dark place. When you end up in a dark place, sometimes the only thing you can do is to seek professional help and support. And some of these things might just seem a little bit too hard to do. But these are things that when we're doing okay, if we put them into our lives, the research suggests that they will help and in fact can prevent us from ever finding ourselves in that place of difficulty. It's no surprise, I'm sure, for you to hear that 1 in 5 adults live with some kind of diagnosable mental health condition. 22%, approximately 4 million Australians are living with some kind of mental health condition that's challenging their everyday lives. There are over 24,000 hospitalisations every year, and teenage and young women are deemed to be most at risk in terms of actually acting in some manner. Around 3,000 Australians die of suicide every year, and that affects families, friends, workplace and communities. And if you know someone, you know how deeply that affects. In 2024, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and these are just reported through that mechanism, there were over 3,307 people who took their own life. That's more than road deaths. That doesn't include the people who've attempted and not been successful. This is a serious and significant issue in our community. And so we want to address it for you, our church family, and for those of you who are guests of church family today with some helpful strategies and tools that are drawn both from the ancient wisdom of the Bible and supported by modern research. Because God's truth is all truth. There's nothing in the world that's true that God doesn't already know about and hasn't already told us. And so we want to share with you today a program for what we call resilience and well-being. It's preventing yourself from being in a place of harm's way. Is survival just up to chance? Some people make it and some people don't. We would suggest that there are some things that help to build resilience in our lives. There are risk factors, which are the things that bring us into that dark place. Caleb spoke about a few of them that were in his life: the loss of hope, the loss of meaning, the loss of purpose. And then there are what we call protective factors. These are things that we can build into our lives that help us to stay well-balanced, help us to not get into a place where we find ourselves struggling deeply in depression and anxiety. It's normal for everybody to have some depression and anxiety. What we're talking about is a sustained, long-term impact of that mental health on our lives. And so we're going to talk about you might call it the anagram of bounce, B-O-U-N-C-E, the ability to bounce back, not to take a fall and stay down, but to bounce back. And so we're going to use each of those letters, and they're on the handout that you've received today. The idea of that handout is, even though these are going to seem like very common sense to you all, you'll go, well, duh, we still don't do them. Common sense might be common, but it's not very useful to us unless it's actually really practiced in our lives. And so these 6 things can be very, very helpful in preventing yourself from finding yourself in a struggle. And so I'm going to invite Nick up to come and share the first of these 6 things, the research on belonging.
Thank you. So when we talk about suicide prevention and mental health issues, one of the strongest protective factors we can offer, no matter what a person's age, is belonging. The B in the Bounce program stands for belonging. Statistics consistently show that a sense of genuine connectedness is one of the most effective protections against suicidal behaviour. People thrive when they feel seen, valued, and supported. And while we often assume that adults can manage on their own, the truth is that every person, whether a child, a teenager, or fully grown, needs meaningful connection in their lives. So let me explain this in an illustration. Think of a campfire. When the logs stay together, the fire burns bright and warm. But if you take one log off the fire and put it on its own, it doesn't matter how strong or solid that piece of wood is, slowly the flame fades, the warmth dies out, and the campsite becomes dark. And humans are the same. We were never designed to burn on our own. So belonging starts with spending time together. It's the simple, everyday interactions, sharing a meal together, taking walks together, chatting over coffee, that build safety and closeness. Creating family traditions or shared rituals are just as important. These rhythms remind us that we are a part of something. Another crucial element is fostering healthy relationships, whether between spouses, siblings, co-workers, neighbours, friends. It helps when these are all healthy that to stay grounded and that we feel understood. Healthy relationships protect us from isolation, and they are a lifeline when we start to feel overwhelmed by the everyday problems that we will face in life. Belonging also grows when we engage in community. Joining groups and activities are really, really important. And here in Beenleigh, we have every single activity that you could think of. Here in Beenleigh, we have lawn bowls, we have 10-pin bowling bowls, we have darts clubs, we have bridge clubs, we have cards clubs, we have crochet clubs. Beenleigh has 2 touch football associations. We have rugby league clubs, tennis centres, cricket, AFL. I don't know whoever wants to play AFL, but we have it for when the Victorians come up. Beenleigh even has country music clubs. We have dance clubs. Get connected. So when we help people find belonging, when family, friends, and community, we're strengthening their well-being, building resilience, and offering vital support systems for our community. So the first letter in our bounce is belonging. And it's important that when we connect to communities, when we connect, we're helping ourselves, but we're also helping our fellow community members.
The second letter in our bounce illustration is O, and O stands for outdoors. So these are going to seem like things that everybody does, except, as Nick said, belonging. We all know intuitively it's important, and yet we find ourselves less and less connected, less and less involved with others. And in the same way, outdoors has become a real issue because we've become indoor people. You think about it, as a society, we've become indoor people. Whether it's fear of sun, sun cancer, skin cancer, and we're avoiding the sun in the summer, obviously the Australian sun, or whether it's fear of strangers and the danger of being out and having people who might harm us. We've also become a society that's driven by screens, computer gaming, technology. We've become an indoor people, and as a result, we're not getting the benefit that we could get from being outdoors. We're the most connected generation in history, and we're also potentially the loneliest. We've become indoor more or less all the time, and we're having artificial light instead of sunlight. And yet, the research suggests that humans need sunlight. Studies show that 10 to 15 minutes of outdoor sunlight per day noticeably improves your mental health. It improves your mood, your energy, your stress levels. It improves your sense of general well-being just going outdoors. Simply getting outside in the sun can make a significant difference. There are physical benefits. When you go outdoors in the sun for 10 to 15 minutes, you get vitamin D, which is essential for your bones and your immune system and your circulation. It helps blood vessels deliver nutrients and oxygen to your cells. That's like life. It helps life. Just going outdoors helps life. It leads to better healing and physical resilience. And of course, it also boosts your immune system. It can fight off illnesses and regulate inflammation just by getting outdoors. Now, I'm not saying 3 hours in the direct sunlight. That's not what we're recommending here at all. But we are suggesting that simply going outdoors. You know, the ancient wisdom from the Bible says, the heavens declare the glory of God. Going outdoors improves your mood. There's a condition in places in the world that get a lot of rain, probably Tully, called SAD, seasonally adjusted depression. It's because they're indoors so much, because there's so much rain, they get depressed, and simply going outdoors can make a difference. It can improve your hormones, your liver function, your cholesterol processing. Some of us men who are finding our cholesterol not so good, have we been getting enough outdoors? Our metabolism, our biological rhythm, everything improves by getting a bit outdoors into our life. You know, it's a natural antidepressant. Simply going outdoors releases endorphins, which are our human body's natural antidepressant. It helps to regulate our mood. So sunlight counters things like excessive screen time. Raymond and I were talking before the service this morning about the fact that with so much screen time focus today, psychologists are now recommending whatever time you're spending on screens, you spend the same amount of time outdoors. Simply to balance and counter the way that people are getting addicted to screens. There's a condition called anhedonia. You might have heard of anhedonia. It's actually because of so much stimulation from technology and screens, people are losing their capacity to feel. It's like they've been overwhelmed by stimulation, and so they're losing their capacity to feel. And outdoors, getting outdoors, simply for 10 to 15 minutes, let's start with that. We can balance it with screen time as well, is one of the easiest and most effective things that you can do. So sun exposure before 10 a.m. So some of you like to stay in bed. Some people like to stay in bed until 10 a.m. Sun exposure before 10 a.m. can reset your body clock. It helps to regulate your sleep pattern, your circadian rhythm. It helps you fall asleep quicker. It improves your emotional stability. Your body needs sunlight the way your phone needs charging. In other words, every day to top it up and keep it going. Here's a suggestion, practical action step. 5 minutes of sunlight before 10 a.m. will reset your body clock. Just get outdoors. Commit to 10 to 15 minutes outdoors every day, and your brain and your body will thank you. I've just got a short video which I'm going to put up.
The more you stay home, the less you want to leave, and the more you stay, the heavier everything feels. You think you're resting, but you're actually draining the life out of yourself. Your brain slows down, your thoughts get louder and slowly, you stop wanting to do anything. Psychology calls it mental rumination, when your mind keeps spinning, stuck in the past, worried about the future, and tired of the present. Even a short walk feels too hard. Even sunlight feels like a task, but it's not because you're lazy. You're just mentally tired. The longer you stay in that loop, the harder it is to break. But here's the truth. You don't need to feel better to go outside. You need to go outside to feel better. Step out, sit in the sun, hear the wind, feel the world move again, because the longer you wait, the deeper the trap becomes. The longer you hide from the world, the heavier it becomes. Healing doesn't always start with rest. It starts with movement. Follow us. We help you break free from what no one sees.
Okay, good morning. So I'm going to talk about usefulness. Okay, no, the clicker. Yep, okay. Okay, so for people that don't know about me, I'm Raymond, and of course I come into this church, and I'm also work as a mental health social worker and a clinical family therapist. So my bread and butter is basically working with people that struggle and family that struggle with mental health issues. Now, interesting about the topic when we're talking about, in the Barnes frameworks of usefulness now, I always were looking at the fact that we need to remember the 3 R's, okay? And it really stand for recognize, responsible, and response. Now, what does it really mean? When talking about recognize, we need to be able to know and recognize that whatever happened to us matters. It doesn't really matter whether it's good experience or bad experience. That whatever happened to us, our experience matters. There's always a usefulness in terms of what actually happened to us. Now, one of the things that, is probably, we always say, if we make mistakes, it's always a good idea to go back, evaluate, and learn from it. Now, there is an interesting risk though. A lot of the time when we just keep looking back, the tendency for all of us is that we're focusing on what's the problem, what did we do wrong, how bad we feel. Now, interesting about it is that when I work with families, especially parents that actually struggle with how to manage the children, especially, some of the family that I saw, they will have the kids getting to the point that they explode, they become aggressive to them, and they need to do whatever that they can to actually just settle the young person. Now, of course, when the parents came to see me, one of the normal things is that they all feel really bad. Oh, well, we are bad parents. We're not able to manage the situation. We are so worried about, what's going to be the outcome for their kids. One of the things I always remind them, and in fact, it's interesting, every time when I remind the parent the same thing, they all are a little bit surprised. When you really think about it, when your child became explosive, became aggressive, whatever that you try to do, you try to settle your child. If you really think about it, it might be a very difficult process. It might be exhaustive. You might feel really, really tired as a result of that, and emotionally you feel that you have a lot of burden. But at the end of the day, your child settled. The crisis finished. Now, we normally just focusing on how bad when problem happen. But we need to be able to recognize when things happen, there's always something useful about it. In fact, one of the very common strategies in our work, in clinical work, is, okay, let's look at what happened and let's look at how you deal with it. Because the bottom line is, whichever way that you try to do and deal with the crisis situations and you're actually able to settle the crisis, there are significant informations that you already have, your strength that you already have, the actions that you already taken that have been useful for you to manage the difficulties. And if we're talking about learning from the past, that is the real learning here. So I guess that's the things about it is that, when we're going through difficult and challenges, because naturally we will try to manage the problem. And the things that we do, the way that we actually try to attempt and settle the crisis, if we can recall what are the things that we have been doing that's useful, that is going to be a lot more useful for us in terms of learning from our action, learning how we solve the problem. And it's a growing process. Of course, we can always, look back and think about how we improve what we do. But we need to recognize that it's actually going through our experience, things that we do tell us that what is useful and what is not. And also another thing is that when we using the lens of, okay, so I went through a difficulties, what have I done that's useful to myself and to my family? Now, when you use this lens, it actually helps us to focus not so much on how bad things happen, so we don't ruminate about the bad emotions, and it more likely helps us to actually shift our focus onto doing something useful. We take action. Now, the second concept, the second R, is being useful. Now, when I say being useful, it is actually a choice. It is actually a responsibility that we choose to take. Now, Caleb before mentions about the whole concept about existentialism. Now, a little bit of a statistic. When the book Existentialism first came out, actually, I think many years ago, that's a long time ago, it's a very old book. Because existentialism is about what is the meaning of life. Now, when that book actually came out in Japan, the statistic is that the youth suicide in Japan actually skyrocketed. Now, because there are some misconception floating around about existentialism. Now, existentialism, the first concept is saying that life has no meaning. And the trouble is that a lot of the people looking at existentialism, they stop when they're looking at the concept of life has no meaning. They didn't continue. If they continue to look into it, the important part about existentialism is life has no meaning. It is you are going to choose how to make meaning out of your life. So in some way, what we do, what we choose to do matters. We choose to take responsibility about what we do. We choose to take responsibility about what's going to happen to us. We choose to take responsibility to do something useful when we are experiencing difficulties. That makes a difference. Now, being Christians, one of the interesting things, yes, we feel bad when bad things happen. Yes, we trust God going to look after us. However, though, we still need to really pray and talk to God. Please help us. I think the testimony that Caleb made is actually very, very important here. Yes, he's in a dark place. It's actually very difficult for him. He's actually not even thinking about what life worth living. But he did something very useful. He actually took the step, even he is not sure. He was not sure whether God exists. He still choose to actually pray and actually say, hey, God, if you are real, please help me. Now, there are active actions that Caleb took that really make a difference. Jesus Christ died on the cross for us to save us. But we still need to be the one choose to accept him. And I guess that responsibility matters. Our choice matters. And one of the things that it's a kind of an old saying that, I think people would know is that, while I do not have control over what happened to me, I have control over how I deal with what happened to me. If we choose to do something useful regarding to what happened to us, we start making changes to what's going to happen in the outcome. Okay, then last R is response. We're really talking about action here. Now, one of the things is there's some overlapping about all the concept in bounds. But I think in terms of usefulness, I want to ask this question. I always ask people in therapy, do you think that we will wait for our feeling change, then we are going to do something that make a difference in our life? Or do you think that we choose to do something to actually change our life, then our feelings going to change? Now, interesting statistic, one of the most problematic symptoms in depression. In the last 10 years, the research saying that, one of the most problematic symptoms is what we call stress-generating behavior or stress-generating decision-making process. Patients will make decisions that complicate their problem. Like, everybody knows that, whether you got depression or not, there are statistics, there are well-documented evidence. If you are depressed, get up every morning, get out of the house, do 30 minutes walking exercise. If you keep doing it in about 3 months, 6 months, you will feel better. Interesting though, the most general presentation, most common symptoms that are actually coming out from the mouth of the depressive patients a lot of time is that, yes, I know I should go out and walk 30 minutes, but yeah, I don't feel like it. Okay, well, actually this morning it's a little bit cloudy. I think it's going to rain, so now I think I'm going to have a bit of rest. Oh, well, actually, I'm a bit tired. Yeah, that can wait. I can do that tomorrow. Now, the interesting about it is that we do need to choose to take action. We can't wait for our feelings to change. And also another thing is that also actions on usefulness is not just about useful to ourselves. It's also about useful to other people. Being a Christian, we're talking about serving others. Now, one of the very good evidence is that and you all would have that experience, when you're trying to help other people and serve others, you will notice that somehow you're focusing on other people. You don't really pay that much attention on your own. Now, psychologically, that is actually one of the strategies that we will recommend people to do, because what causing you problem is how you feel. Okay. Think about early in the morning, you get up, you are so tired and sleepy. Oh my God, I don't feel well. I don't feel like going to work. Now, the good thing about it is that all of us have that ability. Jesus, I can't really not go to work because then I won't, I won't have incomes and it will affect my families and I will not be able to do those things that I want to do with my family. I can't look after my family. Now, we all have the experience that we will make the decision to put aside how we feel and we put our focus of attention onto something that's more useful and more helpful to ourselves as well as to our loved ones. So serving others have a very important element which help us to shift our focus of attention away from our feelings. And one of the, probably a side story I'm talking about when I'm talking to, young parents, especially when they struggle and they say, oh my God, being parents is hard. And I always say, yes, actually, it's a very interesting lesson. Because the first day when your child's born, we all as parents learn one very important lesson. And that lesson is, it's not about me anymore. Whatever I do from this point on, it's actually for this little one that I love. So you think about it, when we are being useful, when we are serving others, we shift our focus of attention away from our feelings. So if the feeling is negative, it's not going to affect us. And that is probably one of the fundamentals about how people continue to spiral downward, is when they stuck with their feelings and not able to take action that are useful. And also, you know, if we're talking about parenting, I would probably say that most of the people, if you're parents, you will know, one of the real joy about being parents is actually that you really trying to look after this little one and watching this little one growing up, and somehow that make our lives a lot more meaningful, okay? And a lot of parents will say that, you know, one of their main purpose is actually trying to actually support the young one and actually watching them growing up healthily. And I guess that's probably one of the things that will always draw us back into, okay, doing something that's useful. Now, of course, go beyond our family is then about, which is the question I will ask you guys, what are your passions? Are there things that you are experiencing, you are seeing, you're witnessing, that you actually really want to make a difference? Because if you actually have those ideas, being able to focus on your passions and try to do something useful about your passions so that you can make contribution to your family, to your church families, to your colleagues, to the society, depends on what you choose to do. They are actually very important protective factors to make sure that you find meaning in your life, especially you will find energy and reasons to choose to do something useful to get through the difficult time. So perhaps back on to.
Thank you. So the next letter in our bounce is nighttime. So I want you guys to picture me back when I was 18 years old. I was skinny, I was really fit, and I was a first-year apprentice baker. And so I got 4 hours sleep Friday night. I woke up at 11:30 at night, showered, got ready. I started my Saturday morning shift in the bakery at 1 a.m. And I did a 12-hour shift, and when I was getting towards the end of this shift in the bakery, I get a text message from a friend, "Hey Nick, it's the weekend, do you want to come to the Gold Coast?" And I'm not thinking, I have FOMO, they can't go to the beach without me, I'm going, I'm in. So I'm like, yeah, I'll go, pick me up on the way through. So I finished my 12-hour shift and only 4 hours sleep. We head to the Gold Coast, we go boogie boarding, surfing, we cook up a barbecue, and then every part of me, or my brain anyway, is saying, I need to get home. I've got to work tonight. But then they go to a party, and I don't want to miss out on a party, so I go to the party as well. I'm young, I can do this. Bon Jovi wrote, "I'll live while I'm alive and I'll sleep when I'm dead." That's bad theology, guys. That's bad philosophy because it doesn't work. I end up leaving the party. I quickly shoot home. I have a shower. I get into my uniform and I start my next shift in the bakery Sunday, 1 a.m. And I haven't been in bed since 11:30 Friday night. And then the guy that looks after me, he was only a couple of years older than me, had just finished his apprenticeship. He's like, "Oh, Nick, I didn't get much sleep last night. Let's just pump this out." And I'm like, "You don't have to ask me twice. Let's just get this done." So I'm working the ovens, and he's pumping out the dough. He's pumping everything out. I'm putting in the ovens and out. And because I'm so sleep deprived by this point, the alarm goes off. I go to grab a tray of bread rolls out of the oven, and I forget to put the oven mitts on. And I end up with blisters all down one hand. Thank goodness I went, ow, and didn't use this hand to grab the other one. And I've completely burnt my hand. My boss just goes, "Oh, Nick, go to the toilet, pee on it, you'll be right." So the point of this letter in Bounce is when you're working with food, you don't pee on your hands. That's really important. And the second thing is that sleep is actually the most important thing that we can do for ourselves. So why do we need sleep? I'm going to go through, and I haven't written these up. These are an expert did this, but these are the 5 stages of sleep. So think of it like a video game. All right, we log on. All these guys are playing Counter-Strike. You're on stage 1. It's light sleep. Your body begins to relax, your heart rate slows down, and you're very easy to wake up. So this is the point where all married men don't make any sounds when your wife's asleep. Do not wake her up at that point. Then we go into stage 2, which is a deeper relaxation. So this is where the body temperature drops, the brain activity slows down, and the body begins to repair itself. Once you've gone into stage 2, then we go into stage 3, and this sounds really nice for any parents in the building, a deep sleep. Oh, a deep sleep. This is where the muscles start to repair and growth hormones are released through the body. Deep sleep is nice. Then we go into stage 4, and this is the stage where no young parents get to for about 10 years. So we're going to where empty nesters, this is where you guys get to sleep now, even deeper sleep. Brain waves slow dramatically. The immune system starts the recovery. So this is where your body starts to heal itself from diseases or viruses or flus, all that sort of stuff. And then, if you're not a parent of young kids, you go into the REM sleep, the dreaming. The dreaming is where the brain starts to process emotions and memories. And see, to be healthy mentally and to be healthy physically, we need these 5 stages of sleep. But what happens when we don't get enough sleep? Well, stage 5, if you sort of go with me on a bit of a journey, REM sleep. REM is actually the name of one of my favorite bands called REM. And REM, their big hit song was Shiny Happy People. But if you don't get to the 5th stage of sleep, you're not a shiny happy person, are you? You're irritable. You're in a bad mood. You're grumpy. You're like a big human cactus walking around in society. You're prickly. And I can see all the spouses looking at each other right now going, ha ha ha, that's you. That's you when you don't sleep. See, because when we don't sleep enough, we're grizzly, we're grumpy, we're not thinking clearly. So by not thinking clearly, we're not solving problems in life or at work, but B, because we're not thinking clearly, we're overreacting to things. We're overreacting. But then we're also more accident prone, like me in the bakery. And I've seen even more horrific accidents when I was working in a production line where guys actually would commonly nail themselves with their nail gun because they hadn't slept enough and they were working long hours. But then why we really need sleep, and this is really important, apart from being really irritable in society, is when we're not sleeping enough, we're more prone to anxiety, to depression, and to suicidal thoughts. So how can we get better sleep in today's day and age that is so full of invitations, that's so full of distractions? Well, the first step to getting a good night's sleep is stick to a routine. It's really important for us, especially in a working week, that we go to bed at the same time each night and we try to wake up at the same time each night so our body clock knows exactly when it's nighttime, when it's sleep time, and when it's work time. We also need to create a restful environment. So before going to bed is not a good time to bring up something that your spouse or friend did that offended you through the day. Do that in daytime time, not nighttime. When you finally lay down in bed, that's not the time you elbow your spouse and say, I am so angry at you. And then he's like, hey, I don't need to sleep. Let's talk this out for the whole entire night. And we don't need to talk about it for the whole 12 hours we had before bedtime. Wind down. Now, this is a really important one. When it's winding down time, avoid screens, avoid computer games, avoid scrolling, avoid any sort of TV an hour before you go to bed. I had, because of the bakery job, I ended up with insomnia for a number of years, and my doctor actually said, "Have you got a TV in your bedroom?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Get rid of it." So since the age of 20, I haven't had a TV in my room because my body now knows that when my head hits the pillow, it's sleep time. It's not computer games time. I'm looking at you guys over here. Yeah, I'm young, I can play video games until 2 a.m. on a work night. But when I go to bed, that's sleep time. And my body now knows that, and I haven't really had trouble sleeping since. Avoid caffeine, heavy meals, and sugar after dark. Keep all the caffeine and sugar, and I know it's so hard. In heat waves, all you want to do is eat ice cream at 10 o'clock at night. No, if you really want to have a good night's sleep, avoid that stuff. So these are some helpful tips if you are having trouble sleeping. If you are having trouble sleeping, see a doctor. Seek medical advice. This isn't medical advice. But Chuck Swindoll once said the most spiritual thing a person can ever do is go to bed 1 hour earlier. So remember, for the sake of our health and our well-being, and for the sake of our family members that have to live with us and our work colleagues, go to bed, people.
Okay, so now talking about the next one is count our blessing. Now, in fact, what we're talking about is gratitude and count our blessings. Now, there's actually this study, in fact, looking at counting blessings and also looking at burden. In fact, really what it means is looking at how people focusing on the positive aspect of the experience and being able to be appreciative of the positive experience actually make a difference to their mental health. Now, this study really, the result really indicating that, for people that paying attention to positive aspects of their life on a regular basis, and we're really talking about kind of like daily, they seem to be able to boost their mood as well as the relationship. So in general, that there are a lot of evidence already indicating that if we actually count our blessing, which, of course, when we count our blessing, what do? We need to pay attention to the good aspects of things that actually happen. Okay, so we are not just looking at the problem. We actually count, so those things that is not supposed to happen, is not a given. Okay, for example, when we're running through difficulties, every time when there is a disaster, okay, we're looking at flood that happened in Queensland. Not that long ago, I think, the hails. Now, all those are very bad things. Bad weather happened. Okay. Now, if we're focusing on, all the damages, how horrible that is, and, how much that we don't have control over the disaster, okay, then we begin to feel really bad. Now, saying that though, can I just check how many of you actually had, hail damages or flooded experience in the past? Yeah? Okay. Now, when you think about it, at those times that when you are experiencing those difficulties, did you notice that a lot of the people that care about you around you would actually come to your help? Do you notice that family and friends will normally come to you and just check on you to see, are you okay? Yeah? People had that experience? Okay. Hopefully more. Okay. Now, the interesting things about it is that, good experience and bad experience, most of the time they do come hand in hand. But it is actually up to us to recognize when there are good aspects in our life that are actually happening. And also recognizing that it is actually not a given. Now, just because I had a bad time, I had hail damage, does not mean that people that I know have the obligation to come to me and check on me. It is actually a gift. It is some things that they just do because they care about us and they worry about us and they love us. Now, I guess that's probably the important part about when we say count our blessing. That when we notice those positive aspects of lives and experience, they are not given. Being able to recognize that they are not given and it's really a gift from other people. And of course, the question we're always talking about, the grace of God. Now, the grace of God is not given. But being able to recognize that they are grace of God actually help us to move forward even during difficulties. Even when we know that we make mistakes that might contributing to our problems. And I guess, one of the things that, I come across most often in clinical work is parents always say, oh, well, their kid, run into problems. Their kid, have mental health problems. Their kids actually, run into youth justice and being picked up by police. One of the more common things that they will happen is they all go to blame themselves and say, oh, well, I've done something really bad here. And how come I actually such a bad parent? Interesting though, yes, I guess, as a parent, and I'm a parent myself, and I'm probably one of the first person will say that, yep, actually as a parent, one of the things I always regret, and I always talk to God and say, well, God, how come you let me be a parent, but never actually give me a menu? Okay? When I go to a shop and I buy something, it always comes with a user menu. So where is my parent menus? Funny enough, now I know some of probably I believe that more males that we have that experience that when we get a new equipment and some people will look at the menu, but some people are actually quite enjoying just looking at the menu and go through the process of figure out how to make it work, even though majority of the time that can make you really frustrated. Do we have people like that here? That when you bought a new equipment, you go through that? Yeah. And interesting about it is that there is very much a level of enjoyment and achievement that when you notice that you don't really look at the menu and you're actually able to figure this one out. And I guess in some way being a parent, it's not come with a menu, but it's about how we are able to experience life, looking after our children, and in fact, we grow and learn with our children together. And in some way, when you really think about it, while we don't have a menu, what we have, it's actually much more valuable because we learn and grow together with our kids together. And that makes a huge difference. Yes, there are frustrations, there are worries. There are times that we will be worried about, oh, did I make a mistakes? But if we really pay attention to it, all those times that you are actually going through with your kids, the things that you discover, things that you learn, and how you actually figure out how you make sense and connect with your children. Now, those are all the discovery. Those are all the interesting lessons that we have. Now, how many of us will actually go back and count those blessings, those things that it's not necessarily always happen, but somehow it's like a gift just happened in our lives. And I guess that's actually important things to keep in mind. Now, of course, counting blessing, gratitude, if you're looking at research, are already saying that, it actually improves our emotional health, our physical health, strengthen our relationships, improve our learning, increase our energy level, improve our ability to deal with trauma and crisis. The things about it is that because if we count our blessing as well as we have gratitude, It shifts our focus attention to what actually going to help us. It moves ourselves away from just focusing on how bad we feel and how bad we experience. Because one of the interesting things, and it was a bit of a joke when early stages when I learned about sort of therapy, and I always say, we always, among our colleagues, we always say, well, actually, you know what? I think we actually just discover the value and how valuable about bad experience and about sadness. And then the other will say, huh? Really? I'm sorry, I can't really make sense of that. Sad is sad. I feel bad, I feel bad. Then someone will say, well, actually, if you don't feel bad, then how can you compare your experience for you to know that when you feel really good? There's a very common, sometimes we will say, when we have something, we take it for granted. And we never really discover how valuable and how important about the things that until we actually really lose it. We have our families around us. We have our parents. We have kids around us. A lot of the times that we might just take it for granted. Oh, they're always there. It's not until we actually notice that, well, actually, no, they do not necessarily need to be there. Some people, they don't have those. It's not a given. When we recognize that, it helps us to focus on what's important and what's valuable to us. And it's very important we're focusing on those aspects of our lives rather than just focusing on the bad experience or bad things that happened. Because, and I always say, bad experience happened. The trouble is that they are also very seductive. They will drag you into what we call a rumination. The way to get out of rumination is start pay attention to the blessing, to the good things that happens that are not necessarily given. It just happened because people loves you. It's happened because God loves you. It happens because you've got a lot of people that's important to you, willing to not take things for granted and pay attention to you and care for you. Now, of course, when you're able to pay attention to those, it also helps you to shift your focus not just on yourself, but actually on what's important in the relationship. And now, talking about it, it is a choice. That means that we need to take actions. Okay, we need to be able to shift our focus attention to the positive experience. We also need to be able to recognize that it's not a given. And we actually need to choose to allow ourselves to experience feeling of thankfulness. And I think it's interesting about, we're always talking about how can people be happy. Now, one of the statements is, it is not happy people who are thankful. It is thankful people who are happy. Happiness coming from within. You can't wait for the happiness to happen. You've got to choose to do something, to think about things in a way that makes your life happy. And the last one, how do we do it? Because most important, we're talking about something is our choice. That means that we can choose to do. Well, one of the common exercise people will do is gratitude journaling. Write down things that you are grateful for on a regular basis. Reflective practice, that means that every day take some time to really count your blessing. Really noticing that things actually does not necessarily need to be happening. That's good, but it actually happens in your lives. People that will come to your life, not because of not because they need to, it's because they just care about you, they love you, and they will come into your life. Mindful awareness, being present and aware of the experience, the positive experience as it occurs. So you're actually able to appreciate it. Stay with that experience. And and learning prayers of gratitude, and also some of the simple things nowadays. Everybody got a smartphone that actually have photos. Now, how many of you would actually, whenever you come across something that, oh, okay, that's really nice, that's really good, and then you just pick up your phone, turn on the camera, and take a snapshot of it? And those actually are very useful materials to become your gratitude journal. So hopefully you can put something in actions after this.
Thank you. It's all right. So as we're going through our bounce analogy, we've got B is belonging, being part of a group, connected to others, recognising that you've got support. O, getting outdoors, making sure that you're actually getting some sunlight, replenishing your body system. U is a sense of usefulness, both understanding what's useful in you to do and being useful, taking your attention off yourself and putting it onto others. It gets rid of the selfish thinking. The Bible says that Jesus did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. If you want to be great in God's kingdom, learn to be the servant of all. Serving one another actually takes the focus off ourselves, gets rid of the rumination. N is about nighttime, getting enough sleep, getting enough rest. In fact, God also declared on the seventh day to rest. We call it Sabbath. And then we've seen count your blessings. When I was growing up, my mother used to say, count your blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. Anyone remember that one? Yeah, that shows our age. We've got to count our blessings. And then finally, and this, I suppose we're coming full circle with where we started with Caleb talking about this existential crisis. Why do I exist? One of the protective factors is knowing why you exist. Okay, because what you think matters. You think about an elephant. Now, when an elephant is little in a circus, they chain it to a stake in the ground by a chain tied around its leg, and that little elephant, tiny little thing, pulls against that stake, and no matter what, it can't get away. It's stuck. But if it keeps believing that for the rest of its life, it'll be... they get very old elephants. In its 80s, powerful, strong elephant could very easily just rip that stake out of the ground and go off and wander. But it's tied there because its thinking hasn't changed. What we think matters. We are a sponge. We are sensory input devices. Our senses, we've got eyes, ears, nose, mouth, touch, sensation. Everything that's coming into us is taking in the world, but taking in the world alone is not enough. We need to have a way of thinking about what happens in that world, and we call them beliefs. I know that there might be some people who are in this room who are fighting battles that no one else can see. And you've come here today because you're hoping to try and find some hope and stability, and that's incredibly brave. But when my son was going through the start of his depression, we went and saw the doctor. And the doctor offered some medication. He said, this is helpful medication. He said, but what will make all the difference along with this medication, which can help at the moment, is changing the way you think. You've got some negative patterns of thinking, and they are causing you damage. Over the long term, you are going to need to change the way you think. The medication will only help to start with. Because whilst there are chemical needs that may need to be addressed, the long-term need is to change our thinking. Ancient wisdom from the Bible says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. We absorb like a sponge, but we've got to come up with mental frameworks that help. Ways that hurt are bad. Ways that help are good. The biggest question humans often ask is why? I've just become the grandfather to two beautiful children. One of them is here today up the back. Hi, Narella. She's only 2 weeks old. And my grandson, Zebedee, is about 8 weeks old this week. I can't wait till they can talk. I'm expecting them to say Papa first. Papa J, JJ. JJ. I'm hoping that the first thing that comes out of their mouth is Papa J or JJ. But you know what I think probably will be the first thing that will come out of their mouth? Well, that might be there. Why? 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 Any of you who are parents here know that one of the most frequently asked questions of a young person is, why? It starts at 2 and peaks at about 75. But the question changes, doesn't it? To start off with, it's why do I have to put my shoes on? Why do I have to go to bed? Why do I have to? But as we grow, the question changes a little bit to why am I here? Why do I exist? What's the point of life? Why bother? You heard Caleb ask that earlier. Here's the thing researchers have discovered. Where you look for answers to this question shapes your well-being. There's a popular voice in evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins, who's an atheist. Some people look to science and they look to rational science and rational answers for the answers. And this is a quote from Richard Dawkins. He said, "The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at the bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference." Well, thank you for the happy thoughts, Mr. Dawkins. But this is exactly what people believe. Nothing at the top, nothing at the bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, just what is. And if what is all there is, all we have is blind, pitiless indifference. If that's your starting point, what's that going to do to your mental health? It sets it on pretty shaky ground, doesn't it? For the last 60, 70 years, the public education system and the schools and the culture in general has been trying to answer this question from an angle without God. But it hasn't produced the sense of hope that they're longing for, has it? We see in our society such a rise in people not having a good answer to this question, why do I exist? And yet, by contrast, ancient wisdom preserved across generations says something radically different. Listen, in the Old Testament, the first half of the Bible, Psalm 139 says, "I will praise you because I have been remarkably and wonderfully made." You are remarkably and wonderfully made. Does that feel good? I've lost a little bit of weight. I'm waiting for my wife to say, "Oh, you look good." When someone tells you something nice about that, right? You feel good, right? You have been remarkably and wonderfully made. The Bible says it. God declared it. And in the New Testament, Ephesians 2:10, he says something even better. He says, "You are a masterpiece. For we are his creation, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared ahead of time that we should walk in them." God's creation. In the Message translation, it says, "You are God's masterpiece. You're a work of art." Now, there's different contexts where that would work, but if I walked, "Oh, you are a work of art. You're a work of art." God says it about you. And so, instead of blind indifference, you're told you are made, you are known, you are loved, you have purpose, you matter. Think about this. In the world, there are 8 billion people, and not a single person in the world shares your same fingerprints, voice print, DNA, iris. Not another person in the world has the same as you. You are unique. And I don't know whether you've ever looked at an eyeball iris up close, but if you didn't look at it as being part of an eyeball and just kind of blew it up and looked at it and printed it in full colour at high def, you could put it on your wall as an artwork. They're beautiful. Your iris is a beautiful work of art. No one else has the same one. In fact, your DNA reads like a biological code written into a living computer. You are a masterpiece of complexity. If your thoughts shape your mental health, then the way you answer the question, why do I exist, becomes a powerful antidote for despair. Christians still struggle with mental health too. It's not a simplistic cure. We're not saying, oh, become a Christian and everything. You never have a mental health struggle. But you know you are created, you are loved, you are given a purpose, you get stability, strength, meaning. Everything feels less fragile. Having a good answer to the why question is important. And regardless of whether you come to agree with Christians or find that some other answer, it's important to answer the question why, so that you have a foundation for living. I want to finish with this statistic. If I told you there was a tablet that improved your medical condition by 30%, who would go and get it? Tablet that would improve your medical condition by 30%. Right? If I said, hey, do this, it has a 30% increase in everyone who tries it. You'd try it, right? If you're desperate, you'd try it. Well, this is a challenging statistic that not everyone likes to talk about anymore, but belonging to a church, simply being part of a community of faith, has been shown to improve mental health by about 30% on average. Now, let me give a proviso here. There are some churches that have done harm. I'm not saying that hasn't happened. And there are people that do harm. I'm not saying that hasn't happened. But the American statistics have shown that there is a 30% increase in mental health simply by belonging to a community of faith, by belonging to a church. And here's why. Because we went through those 6 things, BOUNCE, belonging, outdoors, usefulness, nighttime, counting your blessings and existence. And every week when you gather as a church, 4 out of those 6 happen automatically. You belong. You're useful as you contribute to the lives of others. You count your blessings as we thank God and one another for each other and the good things that God has done. And we answer the question of existence every single week. Belonging part of a church is a natural preventer and can help with your mental health. We even could go as far as saying nighttime, we advocate rest through the practice of Sabbath. So when it comes to positive mental health, we've got some supports here that have been given to us today. Belonging, outdoors, usefulness, nighttime, count your blessings and answer the big questions. Here's the big question. When you're choosing what to feed your mind, it seems like there's either blind, pitiless indifference or fearfully and wonderfully made. One option drains meaning, the other fuels hope. I'd encourage you to take faith seriously. If there's someone here who's a visitor today and you'd like to explore the existence part of this talk a little bit further, I'd love you to come and see me at the end of the service. I'd like to give you a book that I think you could read or some resources that might help you to really consider why. Look into it a bit deeper. Answer the question, is it blind, pitiless indifference, or are you fearfully and wonderfully made? So these resources have come from Focus on the Family's Born Survivors course, and we hope that you found that useful. You've all got a sheet that is a poster. The idea of that is that you can remind yourself, because obviously some of these things, whilst they're common sense, you need a prompt every day to kind of do some of them, don't you? So you can put that on your toilet door or on your wall, and that can be a reminder to you. And on the back, you'll see some support resources that we've got, that if anyone has been triggered today or has found that they think they might need some additional support, you can reach out for those levels of support through that resource. We wanted to put something in your hand. We've gone a little bit over time.